Mike and Tom are registered with Stewart Partners Global Advisory LLC.
Common Sense Finance with Mike Wiginton and Tom Farrell of HL Wiginton Capital Management, an independent investment and financial planning firm in downtown Jasper. Mike is a chartered financial analyst charter holder, and Tom is a certified financial planner professional. They are here to discuss and give their thoughts on current financial and economic matters. Now, with Common Sense Finance, here are Mike and Tom.
All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode, and I hope these podcasts will help you out and that you will respond and give us some feedback to the email that should be at the bottom of your screen. And so today, Tom's going to be talking about estate planning and the steps that you ought to take to get your house in order. And, you know, Tom, the first thing I think about when we start talking about estate planning is that it's been my experience that a lot of folks will kind of confuse financial planning and estate planning. Now, I get that to some degree, maybe in a large degree, because some of the steps and some of the documents, some of the issues that we discuss kind of overlap. But the thing that strikes me is that when we start talking about or using the term estate, we're talking about death. So what's going to happen with your financial assets after you die? What do you have to say about whether you find that confusion to be true? What do you have to say about all this?
Yeah, and a lot of the planning does overlap somewhat. But when people think about estate planning, I think maybe there's a misconception out there that, man, that's some big elaborate extra thing you have to do, and you get other people involved. And sometimes that is the case. But more often than not, somebody can accomplish their estate planning goals by taking just a few basic steps with their finances. And I'm going to cover some things you can do, to accomplish those goals. And really, most people, their main goal is, okay, I want certain assets to go to certain people, and I want them to go as efficiently as possible, i.e., I want them to avoid probate. The probate process can be a drawn-out, lengthy process where, it may take a lot longer for somebody to get their inheritance than they would like. So people want to try to avoid that. So we can take a few steps on the front end, setting these accounts up properly, and having them registered properly to accomplish that goal. So I'm going to talk about a few different account types and things you need to do or be aware of when you're thinking about estate planning. Now, this really doesn't have a lot to do with investing or anything, but it's more about, we're kind of putting our estate planning hat on, and we want to advise people in this area. So if you look at your retirement accounts, IRAs, 401ks, life insurance, or if you have an annuity, all of those assets pass to heirs by rule of law. Basically what that means is you can put a beneficiary designation on there, and it goes directly to those people, and it avoids probate. So it's not tied up. There's no delay in them getting the assets. It goes directly to them. Some other kind of assets, financial assets, your checking account, savings account, CDs, even a regular brokerage account. Those assets need to be set up if you have some estate planning goals in mind. Either a joint tenants with rights to survivorship, so the one owner passes away, the other owner automatically takes over ownership of that account. Or you can set it up as a transfer on death if you don't have a joint owner that you have in mind to set up on that account. Because keep in mind, if you have a joint owner on the account, they have some control over the assets in that account. So if that's not the situation you want them to take control of the assets after you pass away, putting the transfer on death registration on that account or changing the registration of that will accomplish that goal for them.
And the transfer on death, or TOD as we call them, avoids probate, like the joint tenants with the right of survivorship, correct?
That's correct.
And one thing that you made me think of when you were talking about retirement types accounts or any of those vehicles like insurance or annuities that have beneficiaries, those beneficiary designations overtake or supersede the will. Is right? Is it correct?
That's right. Yeah. And I've read of cases where the life insurance policy set up. And the gentleman has his wife on there as the beneficiary, like is the case usually, but he gets a divorce, remarries, and he goes back and he changes his will to put his put his current wife as a beneficiary of the life insurance proceeds, but it doesn't change the beneficiary designation on his life insurance policy. He dies, ex-wife gets the money because the beneficiary designation says, hey, this is where the money has to go, and the life insurance company has to pay out as directed. So, that case I'm speaking of actually even went to court, and the ex-wife,
prevailed.
She won the case and got the money. So, you need to make sure while we're talking about wills that the wills are very important. But you need to make sure they line up with your beneficiary designations and how your accounts are set up. Because if they don't, it could cause some issues.
Redundancy there is not a bad thing.
That's right. Because if you have your son named as the beneficiary on a life insurance policy, and you have your daughter getting some of the proceeds from, and it's going to cause a real mess after you're gone. So just make sure all that lines up. Some other assets you need to consider are what we call real assets, real estate, homes, cars, anything that has a title or a deed to it. If you're planning on passing that on and you don't already have it set up in a joint with rights of survivorship, say with your spouse, and you want one of your children or grandchildren to have that house or car or whatever when you're gone, you can go ahead and add that person as a joint on that account. You can change the titling. And that way that particular asset avoids probate.
Right.
Even if you have it in your will, again, if you have it in the will but you don't have the account set up properly, it's still going to go through probate. That person will eventually get that asset, but it may take a lot longer than you wish. So those are a few simple steps that for a lot of cases will solve your estate planning issues. Now, there are some cases where you may need to go to more elaborate means, do some more in-depth planning. If you have a minor child that you have some assets you want to make sure they get, you probably want to set up some kind of a trust for them, have somebody as a guardian or trustee over that trust to handle the assets for them. If you have a special needs child or special needs, maybe even an adult that doesn't have the ability to take care of the finances for themselves, you would need to set a trust up for that situation. Or if you have a child or grandchild that you plan on passing assets to, and they're just not very good with money, and you're afraid they may not handle money the right way, you can set a trust up that kind of controls the distribution of the assets to them. So that, as well as obviously you hear about the ultra wealthy that have estate tax issues, things like that. There's obviously some much more complicated in-depth planning that needs to go in place for them. But other than those four situations, typically you can handle that with just making sure you have the account set up properly.
And depending on your situation, you're probably going to bring other professionals into the mix, whether they're accountants or lawyers, as you mentioned. And so that kind of, I would almost say goes without saying, but we want to say it anyway, that that it does depend on your particular complexities of your situation.
Correcto.
So, and to sum it up, the main thing I take away from your conversation is that the part about most of what folks need, or a big portion, is not elaborate. And what that makes me think of is it applies to lots of people, not just so estate planning is not just for, as you put it, the ultra wealthy. It applies to most of us.
That's correct.
If we want to avoid some real issues as far as passing assets along at our death. So with that said, thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
I just can't believe all the things people say. Controversy. Am I black or white? Am I straight or gay? Controversy. Do I believe in God? Do I believe in me? Controversy. 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 I can't understand.